Okay, so welcome to the second part of the review of the eCPPT, of the certificate. Last time, or in the first part, I forgot to go over some details about the report itself. So what I want to do now is talk about the report real quick, and then go into detail how I think you should prepare for the eCPPT, or how in fact I prepared myself and how I passed, right? So let's talk about the report first. I already mentioned that the report they give you 7 days to finish the report. Now you really need to take some time off for the 7 days of the exam, because you probably need at least, if that's your first time, you probably need at least 4 or 5 days. If you're really good, then you maybe do it in 3. But it took me 5 days, and the last 2 were also necessary to get some more screenshots and so on. I didn't have to get into anything anymore, but I needed at least 2 more days to get screenshots and get some more details, connections on the host, from the host, and so on, open ports, that kind of stuff. You need to mention all of that in the report. So, but for the report, you have 7 days, and it took me like 2.5, 3 days to finish the report, and I only worked half day, and not even half day, like let's say 4 hours per day on the report. So if you want to, you could probably finish a report in 1 day. The first 3 days I just took time off, to calm down, to relax, and then the second part of the report week, I finished the report. But you don't need the 7 days, in my opinion. Now you get the materials, right, for the eCPPT. You also get a template for the report. So what I did, in my opinion, that the best thing to do, what I did is download the template. I can't link it here because I didn't find a public link, so I guess it's not allowed to link it here. I will not do that, just to be safe. But as soon as you enter the eCPPT, you get a template on how they think a good penetration test report should look like. And I followed the report really step by step, or in other words, I did copy paste and just put in all my information, right? In my opinion, that's the best you can do. You can use any other template you want, but remember, it has to be a readable report. All the information has to be in there, and I think that's the most important part, no unnecessary information. If you think like that, like you would give that report to some customer, right? And he or she hired you because they are not a penetration tester, right? So that's why they hired you. They don't understand all the technical bullshit in there, so they don't want to know all the details, which kernel you use to exploit and this and that. They don't understand it anyway. So if you put all that in your report and you have like 200 pages, you will fail probably, because it's just a big mess of unnecessary data or information, right? But in the end, just follow the template they give you and you should be fine. And don't stress too much about report. Of course, it's important. I'm not saying just take it easy, but you don't need those 7 days. I think they gave you 7 days because they probably want you to relax a bit as well. You won't need those 7 days. Okay. So the next point I want to mention, I mentioned that already, is what you need, like in terms of preparation, in terms of tools, and so on. I went over that already a bit. So officially, or what means officially, they say you need an understanding of basic networking, an understanding of HTTP, cookies, sessions, things like that. So basic networking stuff, basic stuff in the web, a basic understanding of IT security. For example, what is a firewall? How does it work? IP, TCP, things like that. DNS, you need to understand those things. What I didn't say last time, what is important, out of those 5 modules, if you bought the biggest package, right? Out of those 5 modules, only the 3 first modules are important for the exam. So network security, which includes things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, local file inclusion, things like that, you know. System security, which is basically your buffer overflow, like in the OSCP as well. And what else? The network security, which is everything you could do on the network, like exploits and things like that, and unsecure apps, and you know, everything you could do on the network. Those 3 topics are important for the exam. You need to understand those 3 topics. The other ones, if you bought the biggest package, like Wi-Fi and Ruby, they are nice to have, but they are not mandatory for the exam. So you don't need to prepare for those, because they won't question those in the exam. Okay, so now how did I prepare for the eCPPT? I didn't prepare for the eCPPT itself, for the certificate itself. Okay, what does it mean? Like, I prepared for the OSCP and was looking around for what to do, how to prepare, right? But I think, because the certificates, I haven't done the OSCP yet, but I think they're both pretty similar, I guess. And if you prepare for the OSCP, you could probably go into the ESAP and the other way around, right? The only big difference I see right now before taking the OSCP is that you're not allowed to use Metasploit in the OSCP. But that if you understand all those things, I don't think that's a big problem, in my opinion. Anyway, so how did I prepare? Okay, so I will go over the preparation in steps. Okay, the first thing I did before I did anything else, I read a book called The Basics of Hacking and Penetration Testing. I will link that in the description. I also linked that in my other videos, which I read. So if you haven't read any book on penetration testing or that kind of thing, then go with that book. You don't need any other book, in my opinion. That's the beginner. That's your step into the penetration testing, I would say. I read some other books, but I think that's the most complete in terms of for noob, you know, to get into penetration testing. It shows you everything. It shows you the basics, how a professional penetration tester would go about a penetration test, you know, how they would go into that, all the basic tools, and shows you examples as well. So I think that's a really good book. So if you haven't read any other book, go with that. Okay, the second thing is what you should do after you read that book, or maybe at the same time. I will post a link to another website, which is where some guy or girl, I don't know, collected a lot of vulnerable VMs from vulnhub.com, right? And they're separated into beginner friendly, intermediate, expert, and so on. And you should download and set up and try to get into all those VMs from beginner friendly. If you open the link, you will see what I mean. Okay, there's no point in posting all the links in the description again. Open the link and then you will see beginner friendly. Go through all those VMs, and that's a good preparation for Linux exploitation, right? Or penetration testing on Linux. Number 3, the next step, what I did or what I would suggest is register with hackthebox.eu. Yeah. I will post a link again. Okay, every time I talk about a link, I will post it in the description. On that website, they also have Windows machines, which is rare because usually you need a license and so on, so you can't share it. You won't find any Windows machines on bullenhub.com, for example. Try to get into try to get into the website, because they have a sort of puzzle, I would say, to even get an account there. And after you did that, try to, what I did, go through 2 or 3 beginner boxes, machines, whatever you want to call it, that should prepare you a bit for Windows penetration testing. Okay, number 4, which is really important. If you haven't done by now, after you did all those machines, you should get a good grip or good understanding about the basic tools. Okay, what are the basic tools in my opinion? Nmap, of course, you could use any other tool, right? But most examples are done with Nmap, and most explanations are done with Nmap. So if you haven't used any other tool, use Nmap. Okay, Nmap. Then a basic web scanner like Nikto, SQL map, burp suite, and a password cracker like Hydra or Medusa, or use them both. See the difference between them. And of course, need Metasploit, right? Understand Metasploit, and Metasploit also includes MSF Venom. How does that work? And oh yeah, that's it already. What do I mean with understanding? So you should completely understand those tools. I don't mean to be an expert in there. You don't need to have understanding of all hidden switches and all the switches in there, and write your own Nmap or whatever. You don't need that, but you should understand. Okay, for example, let's take SQL map. Okay, if you point to a host, you fire with SQL map, and it gives you it basically does everything for you, and you have a shell in like 3 minutes. Okay, you should be able to get that shell on your own manually. You need to understand what SQL map is doing. So if you just point and fire with SQL map, you need to understand what's actually going on in the background. So even complicated and hard things like error-based SQL injection, which take a lot of time, you need to be able to do that on your own. Of course, in the end, you won't probably do that, but you need to understand what SQL map is doing in the background. Because a lot of times you will have situations where SQL map is, you point SQL map to a host, right? You click on fire, basically, and then you get an error. And you need to understand what SQL map is telling you, how to edit the switches and the data you put into SQL map to actually get a shell or get the dump of the database if you want to use it. And that only works if you really understand those things, like the SQL injection, like error-based and time-based and so on and so forth. Okay, you need to understand that. The same goes for all the other tools like Nmap, Nikto, burp suite. You need to understand the most common switches or options in there. So for example, let's take Nmap. What is a connect scan? What is a null scan? What is a XML scan? What's the difference? If I have a firewall or an IDS, why could that be a problem? How could I get around that firewall or that IDS, IPS? How could I split up my packages? Things like that. What is a zombie scan? Those are very important because you will need those later. I'm not talking about the eCPPT itself. I'm talking about the penetration testing itself. You will need to get around that because nearly every firewall out there would probably block scan all ports, Nmap scan. That's noisy as hell in a network. If you open up Wireshark, let's say you would open up Wireshark or your firewall console, and you see one host is scanning 65,000 ports. Well, what does that look like, right? So you need to understand how to get around most basic firewalls and IDS or IPS. Okay. Number 5, step 5. if you haven't done that by now, or if you don't know that by now, you should learn basic Linux commands. You can do that either going through the Linux command line manual, which is very boring, right? Or you use war games. So I will link one in the description. Those are games where you basically connect via SSH, and they ask you to do in the beginning just basic tasks on the command line via Linux. For example, let's say they have a password encrypted zip file, and you need to unzip that zip file, and in there's a key and connection data and so on for the next step. Okay, when you open the link, you will see what I mean. You should be able to go through the module Bandit. It's called Bandit, and go through all the steps. I think they're like 20 steps or so on. It starts from very easy, like connect to this host, congratulations, and then goes or gets harder and harder to get to step 20. Okay, just for information, I went through Bandit and I forgot the next one, the next module as well, and after that I was like, yeah, that should be good enough, and as you can see, it was good enough. Okay, step 6, you should learn the basics about Windows if you haven't done by now. I guess most people are more used or know more about Windows than Linux, I guess, but if not, you should get used to Windows as well, because in the real world you won't only have Linux, right? What do I mean with that? For example, if you install any Windows desktop like Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows XP, doesn't matter, and you install any program, doesn't matter what, okay, what is the folder app data for? Where does software usually save all settings and passwords and stuff? Or what is the registry? Things like that. Where do I change really basic things? Where do I change my IP? How do I find out my IP? You know, you need to understand those. Then if I set up a password, what is the SAM database or the SAM file? Where do I find that? What is the folder system32 and why is it so important? That's what you should know about. Okay, step 7, and this is really important. This could have probably saved me like, I don't know, 2 days in the exam. Could probably, yeah, I would say 2 days easily, yeah, because it took me so long to figure it out, because I haven't tried it at all before, only like once in the labs maybe, but or on my own. You should understand. No, start a different way. If you have a network, right, a normal office network, okay, how does it look like normally? Okay, like a small to mid-sized business. Okay, how does it look like? You usually have a firewall, router. If it's a really small business, that's one device, right? Most of the time, even from the provider. So it's one basic bullshit plastic router, and behind that you have a switch, maybe, you know, a really small switch, let's say for 24, okay, and in that switch you plug in a server, a small, really small server, and from there on it goes to, let's say, 8 to 10 computers, right? That sounds like a normal network, right? And okay, let's say you find access to one of the hosts in there, okay, one of the guys working there doesn't have any clue about computers and internet security, firewall, and so on. And the admin there is just, you know, it's the cousin of the boss or whatever, so he doesn't have any clue as well. So people are able to share their own, or, you know, put their own computers out in the internet, right? Bad idea, but it happens a lot. And let's say one of the guys in there puts out, I don't know, because he wants to try something. He's a developer, right? And he puts out a web server on the internet, okay? And because it's not secured at all, right? Admin is password, things like that. And you find access to this computer, right? Okay. And now you're on this computer, but you're not on any other computer. And the people, the employees in there, at least they're using different passwords for every account and every computer. So now what you have right now is you have access to one of the computer out of, let's say, 10. How do you get from this computer to all the other computers, right? How do you scan, for example, open ports from this computer on the other computers? You can't scan from the outside, from the internet, right? Even the basic Windows firewall won't allow that. So if you would scan computer 123 and you scan the ports on there, you would probably see nothing. Even the most basic firewall in the default settings would block incoming stuff on port 80, on port 443, things like that. But you have access to one of those computers. So you have actually access to the internal network. You can't get on the computer, but you can, let's say, connect over uploaded PHP shell. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is you should understand pivoting and proxying. Did I pronounce it correctly? Proxying, pivoting. Yep. What that means is you have access to this one computer from where you're actually, which allows you to get into the internal network. From there on, you could scan the hosts, and usually, which is bad practice, but that's probably 95% is the case. The internal network is not secured at all. Most admins, and I did that myself in the past, don't care about the firewall in the internal network. Usually that's just, it's internal network, just disable it, doesn't matter. Because it's just a hassle and it takes time to set it up. But here you see why that should have been done, why you should secure your computer from the outside as well from the inside, the internal network. Because if you don't do that and one attacker gets access to one of the computers, then he basically got access to the whole internal network if you haven't secured it at all. So you should learn about pivoting. How do I get from one computer to another computer, right? So this, like, you know what I mean. How do I scan for ports through this computer? And if I use, let's say, Nmap, what issues could I run into? If I scan, let's say I do a full XML scan, what would happen if I would do a full XML scan over the proxy which I installed on this computer? What would happen? You need to understand that. Okay, you need to find out what happens. What are the limitations if you go over another computer? What happens on really in the low level, on the hardware level? What is going on there? If you understand that, then you will understand all the error messages you run into. And I didn't understand it. I didn't know about that, and it took me, I would say, probably 2 days to figure out what was going on and how to get around it. Okay, so Google pivoting, proxying. You could also Google proxying with Metasploit. Metasploit has a module, SOX proxy, which allows you, when you have a meterpreter, is it pronounced correctly, shell on the host, you can install a proxy there. Really easy to use, but you have to understand the limitations. Number 8, learn enumeration, and where you have to look at, where you find interesting information. Okay, on Linux and Windows as well. I will post a link for Linux. Okay, for Windows, I haven't found any nice list, where you could find interesting files. But if you're used to Windows, you probably know already where those files are, like registry, app data, all those hidden folders, right? They're usually full of settings, config files, password files, things like that. Okay, number 9, very important. Learn how to escalate your shell. Let's say you get a shell from one user. Let's say you get a shell through, which is very common. You get a shell through a web server, right? Then if we say that's a Linux machine, then you have then you basically own the user www minus data, or if it's another Linux machine, it may be HTTPD. Okay. But this user does not have root sudo privileges. Okay, so you can't do much basically. I will link for Windows and for Linux a link on how to try to escalate to system on Windows or to root on Linux. Okay, how to escalate your privileges, how to get access to the full system, right? Okay, number 10 and the last one in my opinion, prepare cheat sheets. Okay, what I used all the time is a cheat sheet, or they have several cheat sheets from Pen Test Monkey. Okay, I will link that again. They have cheat sheets on SQL injection, because I can't possibly remember all the stuff I have to type into to get to find out, is that MySQL, is that Microsoft SQL Server, and this and that. Try if time-based work, try if error-based works, all that stuff. That's all in there. You need to understand what it says there, but if you understand it, then there's a really nice list, which puts all the things together. There's an SQL injection, just go through all of them. You will find one then. And they also have other lists for escalation and enumeration, and yeah, just check the link. Okay, so I think I'm basically done. Let me see. Yeah. So again, that's what I did to prepare not only for the eCPPT but for the OSCP as well. As you can see, I made this video very, I didn't go into details about the eCPPT as well, especially because I don't want to get into trouble, maybe losing my certificate and whatever. If you use what I mentioned here, I'm certain that you will get through the eCPPT and through the OSCP as well. I will do the OSCP in the future, in the near future. Right now, I just don't have the money right now. I have to save up a bit because it's not cheap, right? I will do the OSCP in the future. If you have any other questions, I probably forgot a few things in here. If you have any other questions, then please message me that in the comments or send it to me on my Twitter. Anything else I wanted to say? I have a few other things in mind I want to do on this YouTube channel. I'm not done with that yet. Just if you have any suggestions or comments, criticism, whatever, just let me know.